Merlin Wondelbo. In light of the Russian indictments, my liberals are asking me why Trump has not sanctioned Russia like Congress has ordered him to, and the lack of said sanctions means it's because he's in cahoots with them. I have zero information on this, so could you please enlighten me? I'd be delighted to enlighten you, Merlin. This happens to be something I have inside information about. In 2008, when Putin decided he was going to have an adventure down in Georgia, the Obama administration imposed sanctions on Russia, and virtually every restaurant in Moscow went out of business and has been out of business for the last 8 years. The Russian people, and I know this to be true because I'm married to one of them, were so strongly in favor of Trump, just absolutely loved Trump because Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, and Barack Obama had been responsible for all of this agony. And so anti-Americanism now in Russia is even at an all-time high because they had such high hopes for Donald Trump. But when Putin decided to get clever in the Ukraine, Trump not only didn't lift the sanctions, he increased them. I have family now that I'm married into, and I've been married into family for 14 months now. And I can't visit that family, and they can't visit me because the United States and Russia have withdrawn tourist visas. There are doctors and violinists and musicians, orchestras, entire orchestras, comedy groups, all of these individual Russian people, organizations, high-level artists, all of this. They had to cancel their speaking engagements or their touring engagements in America because they cannot get a tourist visa out of the country. I don't get to see my daughter-in-law. I don't get to see my son-in-law. I don't get to see my mother-in-law because they cannot get a tourist visa into America. It all just went away. And the interview with immigration that I'm going to be having at the end of the month with my wife was supposed to happen in July. And the reason it hasn't happened since July is because the shutting down of relations and the damage to immigration with Russia has been so extensive that immigration simply doesn't know what to do. They don't know how to catch up. You can't even get into America from Russia on a tourist visa if you decide to go to Prague, let's say. You could, as a Russian, travel to Prague, but the American embassy in Prague will not give you a tourist visa if you're carrying a Russian passport, even if you're applying in Prague, or the Ukraine, or anywhere else for that matter. And my wife has told me stories, and many, many stories, about how life in Russia has essentially just simply for 10 years, 8 years now, 9 years, has grown to a halt. All of the advertising businesses are gone. That means things like wedding photography is mostly gone. 9 out of 10 restaurants are gone. All of these little businesses are simply gone. The first thing my wife said when she came to America, I mean the first thing, was how nice people were. And the second thing she said was, I can't believe how busy all these restaurants are. There's lines here to go and sit down here. Everybody, these places are packed. I said, yeah, it was like that before these sanctions were put in place by Obama. And she was here for Trump's election, but she talks to her family and my family and her friends, and they're my friends now too, talks to them every day, and every day it gets worse and worse and worse over there. People do not appreciate the power that an American embargo or sanctions has. They simply can't do business. It's the international currency. Still, although I think those days are probably numbered now. They simply can't do anything. I have a son-in-law who works as an editor, of all things, a video editor, and he worked for his production company for 7 months without a single paycheck, waiting for these sanctions to be lifted, and they didn't. So finally they just closed the building down. They coasted as long as they could. How was she able to come to America? Asked known miscreant Matt Lloyd. Well, it's simple, Matt. She came here in September. Well, she came to visit in the end of July and early August. She moved here permanently middle of September of 2016. And we've talked about this many times. It makes our blood run cold. I suspect that if I had met her 4 months later, then we simply would not have met. It just wouldn't have happened. About 3 or 4 months after she came here, these intensifying these restrictions happen. So this idea that Donald Trump is just kissing Putin's butt and that Russia has just got the guy they wanted and they're just happy as can be is just nuts. I know the Russian people wanted Donald Trump because they liked the fact that he was a straight talker. And the whole long shot idea not only appealed to them, they actually were mystified by it. They absolutely thought that in the election year of 2016, the Russian people, hearing this from not just my wife, by the way, but from a number of Russian people, thought the whole idea of a President Trump was kind of cool, but at the same time just so patently impossible. Not ridiculous, just impossible. Impossible. You just don't fight that kind of power structure and win. When he won that election, my wife was astonished. 2 days before, she said, Billy, there's too much money and too much power. You can't stop these things. People make these decisions, and they've decided that Hillary's going to be the president, so that's it. And then the American people just decided to say, not yet, still, that day may come, but it is not this day. So, is it Dewey DeBoer? Hope I got that right, Dewey. Says the same thing about the sanctions in Cuba. You go to Havana now, and you'll see people driving 59 Studebakers in 2017. And the reason that they drive Studebakers in 2017 is because America's had sanctions on them since 1959, and simply it's not even a stasis field. It's the Stone Age. So much for that argument. By the way, I mean, if you really get down to it, Hillary Clinton sold Russia 25% of the total U.S. uranium supplies. Hillary Clinton is so corrupt, she sold 25% of America's uranium supplies to Russia. Well, I should say she allowed the deal to go through as Secretary of State, in exchange for which she got $100 million, Bill got a $850,000 speaking engagement, or something like that. But those two things aren't connected in any way, needless to say, because that would be corruption, and that'd be wrong. So if I'm Putin, I want the money-grubbing hillbillies, right? Who'll do anything for a buck. I don't want the guy who's suddenly telling guys at CENTCOM, oh, no, you go right ahead and take out that convoy. You just go right ahead. We're not going to drop leaflets on these bastards, giving them 45 minutes warning like Obama did. We're fighting a war against these guys. I got pretty close in Syria a couple times. It still gets pretty close every now and then. Obama vacated the Middle East. Putin moved in. Russia was a player in the Middle East for the first time in 40 years. And next thing you know, Donald Trump's back in the game. So which one do you think they want? There's a better point here, though, Merlin. And this was brought up by a friend of mine who said, what if all this Russian interference, which I must interrupt to say, listen, if you think that Russia false news stories through the election, what possible impact do you think that the entire left-wing bias of the entire news industry does? It's 30 points of bias. Russians didn't throw the election. Even if everything that they said is true, and I don't think any of it's true, but even if everything they said it was true, might have swung a point or two back towards Trump from the 30 points that CNN is giving to Obama and Clinton by handing her debate questions in advance and not talking anything about Benghazi or the fact that she stood in front of all these people and lied. Even when Comey, that woman should have been in jail. The director of the FBI spends 45 minutes saying why she should have been in jail and then basically says, but we don't recommend prosecution. In a country with a news media, you would have thought that a reporter would have said, at the very least, Mrs. Clinton, even though you're speaking to us from not behind bars, which is an outrage, you'd think somebody would have said, you stood up on camera, and here's the footage of you denying that you ever put secret documents on there. You're saying that none of them were classified. You're saying you didn't know any of them were. And the FBI director has just admitted that everything that you told us in that speech is an absolute lie. You want to address that since you're not going to jail over it? Please. But my friend's point was, what if Russia's doing all this? Actually, I think is an interesting point. What if Russia's doing all of this stuff, playing both sides against each other and using social media to further divide the country into increasingly hostile, increasingly disgusted, increasingly vehement echo chambers where half the country hates the other half so much? Maybe the Russian goal is to give both sides evidence that the other side is cheating in order to quicken this falling apart that's happening right now in front of our eyes, just dividing right down the middle. I think there's some actual merit to that argument, to be honest with you.